Hello, friends. Listen to what Jesus had to say in the Gospel of Luke. Jesus turned to the large crowds who were following him and said, "If you aren't willing to hate your families, give up even your life itself, don't bother being my disciples. If you want to follow me, you have to carry your cross. I just want you to know what's ahead. None of you can be my disciples if you don't give up everything you own." Imagine Jesus interviewing to be in charge of a church interested in attracting more members. The search committee says, "We've heard you've got quite a following, Jesus. Tell us about some of your ideas for growing the church." Well, Jesus says, "I'm going to tell people up front that they'll need to hate their families, walk a really difficult path to certain shame and ridicule, and give up all their possessions." It's hard to imagine he'd make it past the first interview, isn't it? Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem, and his teachings have been full of what are known as difficult sayings. What could be more difficult than giving up all your possessions, giving up your comfortable life, giving up your family? One wonders if he wasn't trying to thin out the crowds that were constantly following him. Hating one's family is an example of a classic rabbinic technique used to make a point, called hyperbole, exaggeration. This is not something we try to do much anymore, unless you're a teenager or a politician. It is an expression of preference by pairing two things and showing preference for one by hating the other. It demonstrates a different understanding of priorities. Jesus here pairs love of one's family with the love of God's purpose. If you have to choose one over the other, choose what God has in mind. Your priority is to be with God and His will. His second difficult saying points to the cross. Crosses on our mantles, our walls, around our necks, mark us, I hope, in this culture as followers of Jesus. But that is certainly not what Jesus was referring to when he spoke of bearing one's cross. What we have made into decoration, Jesus' culture knew as an instrument of death and a mark of ultimate shame. We've even taken the sting out of the phrase bearing one's cross so that it is more bearable. Bearing one's cross can now mean putting up with a financial setback, a chronic illness, or a boss whose demands are annoying. Jesus' final difficult saying is one we've heard from him before: give up your possessions. Jesus especially identified with the poor at a time when there certainly wasn't anything trendy about living lightly. Having nothing meant having nothing to sell, nothing with which to trade. It meant having to beg on the side of the road with people not looking you in the eye. Jesus was not speaking here to his disciples, not to those who were already committed to him. The text tells us that he was moving in a swarm of people who were curious, interested in this person in whom so many others were interested. Jesus suggests they read the fine print in the covenant of discipleship. In case they didn't get the message from his requirements of hating one's family, bearing one's cross, and giving up everything you own, Jesus wants seekers everywhere to know that there's more to discipleship than listening to him tell stories, more to discipleship than watching him heal and feed people, more than being members of a local congregation. Jesus is doing the loving thing here by making a full disclosure, by refusing to make discipleship sound easier than it is in order to increase his numbers or popularity. He's suggesting we do a cost-benefit analysis and a risk assessment before we hit the road with him. Barbara Brown Taylor says, Jesus didn't want us to think that we were running away with the circus when we're really running into battle. Discipleship, Jesus is telling us, will mean an intentional arrangement and most likely rearrangement of our relationships and our priorities. We might stumble into church membership. We might be born into church membership or marry into church membership. But there is no stumbling into discipleship. We are to choose and nurture discipleship every day. None of us does it perfectly, not a single one of us. Jesus is telling us that following God must make a difference in our lives. Consider what difference God makes in your life. Consider what following Jesus makes in your life. Carrying the cross, paying the price of discipleship is not for everyone. Fear that we won't be able to bear the price, much less the cross, keeps some of us from even considering it. None of us really has what it takes. That's why Jesus did it for the rest of us, to fill in our gaps. We must never forget that. I don't know that Jesus would have fared well in a search process, for he never intended to be a people pleaser. He lays out the costs of discipleship, but he also provides us with everything we need to embrace this new life he offers and to flourish as disciples. That is, the love of God our Father and the relentless guidance of the Holy Spirit. Jesus has paved the path of discipleship himself and has promised to be there with us. May our glorious God make a difference in who we are and what we do, and give us the strength to choose to follow him. God bless you all.